Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Redefining Recruitment. I'm Megan, and I am joined, of course, by Patrick Cahill, the president of Twice as Nice Recruiting. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm great, excited to talk.
Awesome. And of course, we have Caralie Coleman, our VP of Search. Caralie, you're always doing great, aren't you?
Yep, doing wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful's even better. Well, speaking of wonderful, we all want wonderful unicorns and rock stars when it comes to recruiting, but the unfortunate thing is they don't exist. They exist in storybooks, obscure 2000s YouTube videos, on stages. But when it comes to hiring, looking for and wanting a unicorn or a rock star is really magical thinking. Today, we're going to walk you through the challenges of finding a unicorn or a rock star and the real reasons you may be wanting that and what you might actually be able to afford. But first, let's get to know each other. We are Twice as Nice Recruiting, and we do one thing, and that is permanent placement recruiting. We build every single search from scratch. We have a 9.9% placement fee, and we guarantee our placements for 18 months. We've worked with more than 1,800 clients to fill roles across the board, and today we're redefining recruitment. All right, so first, let's start off and just define what we're talking about when we say unicorns and rock stars. Patrick, I know this is your favorite subject, so kick us off.
It's triggering. What we're talking about is when you find yourself as a hiring manager, HR leader, the president of a company saying, I'm looking for a unicorn. What you're saying is, I know what I'm trying to look for is essentially impossible, but let's go find it. And so sometimes it's about a combination of skill sets, sometimes it's about budget, sometimes it's about location. But the common denominator when people are saying unicorn is it's almost impossible. Rockstar is sometimes differentiated, where people mean I want the best of the best. And so, unicorns don't exist. Rockstars do exist, but they're stars and rare. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's how I define those two terms.
And Caralie, is it bad to look for a unicorn or want a unicorn or need a rock star? Curious your thoughts.
It's not necessarily bad to want a rock star. I think it becomes difficult when you really want a unicorn because it might make it so that your search stalls out and maybe a hiring need that you have just stays open for a really long time because you're digging in areas where it's going to make it impossible to fulfill your hiring need.
So I'm curious why you both think that maybe employers feel they need a unicorn or want a unicorn. Caralie, since you're the VP of Search, I'll let you tackle this one.
Yeah, so I think people often find themselves thinking they need a unicorn in situations where they really haven't thought through what's wrong with the setup of what they're looking for, what's wrong with maybe the conditions for the role that they're trying to fill. And often what's being indicated is that they haven't thought through what the market has available talent-wise, what those market realities are. And then, there are clients who are looking for rock stars and they want the person to be the best. And that's great because true rock stars do exist. But they're stars and they get paid like it. So it can be difficult if you're looking for a rock star without that rock star budget. And that unicorn situation is when you're looking for a rock star, but you have that karaoke budget. That's the disconnect that often makes it so that the market won't respond well to what it is that you're looking for and you're offering.
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned the karaoke budget, Caralie. I'm curious what the solution is then if a company needs a unique hire, needs that unicorn or rock star, when they do have that karaoke budget. Patrick, what do you say to companies?
When companies come to me and say they need a recruiting company because they're looking for a unicorn, I respond, as a recruiting company, my job is to tell you unicorns don't exist. And if you're looking for a unicorn, the search is dead on arrival. And we're too late into the process. And there's some level of unicorn hunting that we can help reset expectations to make sure we're identifying what actually is critical about the role and try to knock out kind of the unicorn aspect. But sometimes a recruiting company's insight is not enough to fix the unicorn hunt problem. It's actually a business process issue. We're looking for this person because Steve is retiring after 23 years. And Steve had this interest in this random engineering thing, but also had this scientific background. So he handles both of these things. And we just need to find someone to do that. And it's like, no, Over 23 years, Steve's unique personality and interests and skill sets led to this role. That is Steve. And Steve's also not a unicorn. He exists, but we can't find the next Steve. And so you can't put job ad, Steve. And so we need to figure out how that role could be split up. And so oftentimes it's the recruiter's job, in my opinion, to point that out and kind of send it back earlier into the process for review and figuring out what can we do and then split that search or reset expectations. But the key is if you're saying I'm looking for a unicorn, what you're really saying is I have not addressed a root issue within my process leading up to this moment that needs to be fixed because my business cannot depend on unicorn hunting. That is just a fool's errand. And then, also when people say they're looking for rock stars, that's a little bit easier to talk about because everyone wants to work with high performers. Like I like working with high performers. Uh, Everyone wants to, right? But I think where the distinction becomes almost unicorn-like in some ways is it's our business only works if we have a rock star. Because then what they're saying is we don't have a defined process and we need someone who kind of figure this out and just do it. And then that's getting unicorn-like because you're using this, I don't know what it is, the je ne sais quoi of recruiting to fix really we need to build a better process that's predictable in its ability to produce outcomes because that is a scalable, sustainable business. And so that's, but if it's like, oh, we really like rock stars because they perform well in front of these types of people. And the way we define rock stars is they've had 10 years of experience serving Fortune 500 C-suites. Okay, yeah, that's, rock star-esque. And as long as you understand a budget goes along with it, great.
I think Patrick started to touch upon the biggest part is if you want that rock star, it's making sure that you're able to define and showcase what your appeal is. Why are you able to draw in that rock star? Because rock stars often have kind of a pick of the litter. They can go out and find opportunities. Companies want them. Their current companies most likely want to hold on to them. So, what is it that they'll get by coming to work for your company that makes it so compelling and makes it such a great opportunity? So, I think that's super important. And then just talking about the unicorns, it's looking at your kind of definition of your requirements and what you're saying is an absolute must have and trying to figure out areas where there's wiggle room, areas where you can lighten or soften in certain areas and make some compromise about what is going to work for you. Maybe you have team members that can support and help someone learn in a particular area as long as they come in really skilled in another area. And that can really open things up and make it kind of easier to find someone who is close to the unicorn, but not a unicorn, or someone who is a rock star and attract them so that they actually want to work with you.
I think to just riff off that, if I were to kind of summarize, I like to ask clients, what's in it for this candidate? You have the rock star, why you? And if clients start answering, because of our culture and our work-life balance, that's usually indication that that rock star's bus is going to go to the next tour stop. Like it's just not going to work. And to give a really concrete example, if it's helpful as people think about their situations, I was talking to a company and they needed a very specific type of engineer to work on a very specific type of industrial product. And this person needed to spend 6 months in a very rural area. The reason they need to spend 6 months in a very rural area is because their person who's retiring after 20 years lived in this very rural area and was willing to train this person alongside themselves for 6 months. That's a real need, but they were not acknowledging that this is a company problem, not a candidate problem. They have themselves in a very unique bind where they can't get this very senior person with tons of institutional knowledge to come to a populated area, but and they need someone new to absorb this information. But their job offering had zero acknowledgement that this is not appealing to you, on top of the fact that the very person they're trying to hire and the skill sets they'd be excited about, who's the sure bet that they can trust if they spend 6 months with, is going to be successful in this role, has all the options in the world. And so the conversation became, how do you make that person who's going to be like, no, I'm not going to live away from my family for 6 months in the middle of nowhere so I can learn from this person and then start a job that makes sense to me? How do you go from that to this company really wants me and is excited about my potential. And I could be this person 20 years from now, this company feels is this critical, and just make them feel like a rock star. And by actually treating them like one. And I think that's often the disconnect, saying you want a rock star, but doing nothing to actually acknowledge or treat people like the rock star you're looking for. And if you do, then you get to work with rock stars and you get to attract them.
I really like what you said about how you have to treat a rock star like a rock star if you want a rock star. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, look at that rider. What do you have to do in their green room before they show up and are happy? They like those green M&Ms.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to sum it up, it sounds like rock stars are rare, unicorns don't exist, but great employees do. So the next time you're hiring, be sure to give these suggestions a shot and remember Twice as Nice Recruiting. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Redefining Recruitment.